हेलो।
शुभम,
यस सर।
तुमको बना रहा हूं मैं फिर।
शुभम, आप अपना नंबर मुझे व्हाट्सएप कर दीजिएगा, ठीक है
Yes,
ना?
sir.
एक बार फिर से। ठीक।
Yes, sir.
हेलो।
Yes, ma'am.
हाँ जी, स्टार्ट करूं?
Yes, ma'am.
गुड इवनिंग टू ऑल ऑफ यू। मैं अर्चना श्रीवास्तव गुणात्मक अनुसंधान पर आधारित इस 7 दिवसीय फैकल्टी डेवलपमेंट प्रोग्राम में आप सभी का स्वागत करती हूं। हमारे मुख्य अतिथि महोदय डॉक्टर अरविंद झा से निवेदन करती हूं कि वह अपना सेशन स्टार्ट करें। प्लीज सर।
थैंक यू सो मच अर्चना जी, एक बार फिर से।
थैंक यू सर।
See, the today's topic that I'll be discussing is about ethnography, or you can say ethnographic research methodology, or ethnography method as a research in different disciplines. Okay, but before I talk about that, something I would like to share with you as a background, and which is very important. And then as I did this study, I'll start my formal presentations. See, if you go by, it's very important to understand ethnography in its broader perspective. And then we'll come to why it became so important in the field of research, not only in anthropology and other social sciences and education, but in many disciplines. Friends, so it's very, very important what and how it has helped human beings to understand the research and research purposes in a broader perspective. So if I'm asked that how do you view ethnography as a research method, I would like to say that it is a study of culture. So ethnography is a primarily study of culture. Then you can say it is primarily a study of particular culture. It is a study of a particular society or particular community, or even it could be a particular, the program in a given socio-cultural setting, etc., etc. And it helps us to understand human worlds in a different perspective, not the way it looks to us, but the way it is. May not be truly a reflection of how it is, but yes, you can guess that what it is. And one of the most important components of ethnography is the participant observational fieldwork. So the data is collected from the field itself, and the researcher has to act as a participant observational kind of thing. Now the question arises that when and how it started its journey, right? So slightly I would like to present you in brief, not in detail, that how ethnography started. And for that, I would like to suggest you, friends, please read the history, because the genesis of any concept in its historical context is very important. So simply tomorrow, when I'll be talking about the phenomenological research, or day after tomorrow discourse analysis research, we'll be trying to understand the genesis of these two concepts or three concepts in its historical context. So if you go by the history, the person, who is given this, what you call, that how it became popular and how people got influenced by this. And I think as far as each university, each society, or each world, educational world, came out with a different kind of perspective and different people contributed in a different way, that how it originated and what was the main reason to get it originated. So as far as the historicity is concerned, let me tell you the person, I mean, in the British discourse of research, the person who is given this credit is none other than Malinowski. And Malinowski, perhaps in 1920 or 1918, exactly, I don't remember that year, but maybe either 1918 or 1920, he did one study in an island called Trobriand Island off to the Papua New Guinea. And when he did that work and published that work, and subsequently he became the professor of sociology and then the anthropology in London Institute of Economics, LSE. So ethnographic field work is the method that defines, you can say, social anthropology, because within anthropology, you know that there are shades of the meaning and the shades of the subject orientation within the group. But anyway, so this is one thing. Similarly, what was the subject and what was the perspective? It was completely different from what we generally see, that how it happens. But yes, it's not that, I mean, as a subject or as a disciplinary orientation, of course, the credit goes to him. But there were other people also who studied the life when the intellectually life was heavily influenced by the theories of evolution developed by Charles Darwin, right? And Howard Spencer, Edward B. Taylor, Sir James Frazer, etc., etc. So what happened? This gentleman is basically given the credit, who studied and which was published in 1918, and he has made a point that if you really want to grasp the native's point of view and his relations to life, and to realize his vision of his world, this kind of study or this approach and this methodology is very, very important. So this is what I wanted to share with you. And his subject was, as I said, time and again he has pointed it out in his writings, that the final goal is to grasp the native's point of view and his her relations to life, and to realize his or her visions of his world. So the principles that Malinowski identified apply today as much as then. So they apply not just to those undertaking exotic field work in small communities far away, but equally to those studying groups or studying institutions. So today what I'll be doing, I'll be sharing with you one ethnographic research that has been conducted and contextualized in educational settings. So in order to perform good ethnographic field work in modern settings, it can be an advantage to have undertaken field work in an lean small scale society first. So either way, field work is informed throughout by anthropological concerns. So ethnographic field work used to be more open-ended than it is today. Today, what is happening, I'm seeing that people, identify their research questions first, and then they enter into the field. But there was time when people used to directly enter into the field. People started participating as a participant observer and participant, so they could capture the behavior of that community in a particular cultural settings and to understand. But today it's becoming completely different one. And this is one thing. And this may be, there could be many reasons. One could be the time it changed, another could be the funding could be the problem, time constraint could be the problem, or anything else. So this may be due to difficulties, as I said, and maybe a trend towards more policy-oriented research or multidisciplinary research groups. It could be, I don't know exact reason. However, the ideals of the participant observation method guide all interactions in the field, and ethnographic field research continues to be still, it's a more and more inductive. If we compare the British setting and the American setting, so you'll find that the American cultural anthropology focused on identifying cultural values and ethos embedded in individual actors, and their field research revealed much about the religious understandings, mythology, and notions of personhood. On the other hand, if you look at the development of ethnography as a research methodology, British, French, and other countries, social anthropology was preoccupied with social structure and institutions. And in India also, few people have worked from that perspective only. So ethnographers from these countries sought to map this primarily through the study of kinship system. On the contrary, the American anthropologists were largely studying American Indians in their own country and in Central America. European anthropologists went to Africa to study Asia and the Pacific. So the British and French tended to undertake their field research in their own colonies and continued to go to the same countries after they became independent. So what I want to say is this, that the ethnographic fieldwork demonstrated beyond doubt that there was no basis for maintaining the evolutionary model of human mentality. So formally speaking, a psychic and cognitive unity of mankind was accepted, and the scientific interest lay in exploring the variations of socio-cultural modes that human imagination gave rise to. And then you'll find that the kind of representation and the writing culture debate, and from that point of view also you can discuss about the ethnographic research. Similarly, multi-sited and multi-temporal fieldwork, from that perspective also some discussion may take place. So ethnographic and fieldwork in not only anthropology, I said, today in many disciplines people are using this in medical sciences, right? As I said, not only this, like I would like to share with you that once I wanted to study the Zara brand in its cultural setting, like as an institution, the Zara as an institution, how does it operate itself in its origin, like in the US, and how does it operate from the management point of view in India or in any other country, wherever they opened there. For example, suppose somebody is interested from the apparel point of view, so apparel historicity, then how the Marks and Spencer, operates itself, though the company is same, the ownership is the same, but in different cultural settings. So this kind of a study is today people are doing just to understand the complexity that is there in human worlds. Like, fieldwork method of participant observation and the kind of anthropological questions, debates, and analysis that spring out of it, as these are embedded in a holistic analysis. So questions about social production and the cultural meaning of, for example, kinship. What is a kinship? And do you think the kinship is same in all cultures, or there is a variation of kinship as the culture varies, as the society varies? Similarly, sociality, similarly, labor, money, like how the shades of meaning of money have changed, the exchange, social stratification or the conflict or the authority or the gender, all these, and even education, all these are studied, so that gives anthropology its spatial identity, and that which distinguishes it from the other social sciences. So, but what is happening at the PhD level, what is happening due to decrease in funding and pressures on publishing, PhD students as well as academic staffs are having to change their research practice. A shorter period of field work is becoming common, and more topic-focused research questions are increasingly demanded today. So this raises the question of what insights anthropologists or the researchers who use ethnography can provide that a clever investigative journalist cannot, or someone from cultural studies armed with an exciting theoretical concepts is there. So anthropologists will still claim that only the very nature of their ethnographic method of long-term participant observations can provide a unique contribution to knowledge about other life worlds. Because life world is completely consists of many factors. So suppose if I want to understand the life world of Indians in comparison to the life world of, for example, other countries of the Asia or the Europe or the Africa. So a number of other disciplines have taken to use ethnographic or ethnographic fieldwork in the methods sections of their books. And so it's a full with that. In short, another important point that I would like to highlight is this, that the qualitative research is not the same as ethnography, frankly speaking. Okay, so open-ended interviews and focus groups do not replace the insights obtained from 24-hour or 20 months of informed hanging around. That's a hard fact. So this challenges anthropologists to make clear what they mean by ethnographic fieldwork and what is so special about it. And therefore, what I would like to underline here is this, that it is important to clarify this for the future of the discipline on the one hand, and the interdisciplinary people who borrow your ideas and use their own discipline. For example, when educationists decides to use ethnographic research method in their own field, or the medical practitioners decide to use ethnographic research in their own field, or maybe the management people, or maybe the policy making people, or those who study the policy making, etc., or even those who have developed their interest in institutional studies. So what is so special about their contribution, or the contribution of the ethnography? And there is a scholar, Marilyn Strathern, is reported to have said that anthropologists study social relationship by making social relationships. See the difference. Study social relationship by making social relationship. So one social relationship is existing, but you go enter into the field, then you first make the social relationship with that, and then you try to understand what kind of social relationship exists in that society. Okay, and perhaps that is the answer. So what I'm trying to say is that ethnography research or ethnographic researchers will have to understand this, that they have to make the relationship, only then they can understand the relationship. And that's why I gave you the example that some people wouldn't mind even entering into the marriage relationship or any other kind of relationship to understand that the beauty of that relationship. Like I remember almost 15 years back, I was attending one conference organized by social psychologists, and two psychologists were from England. And they reported that the concept of the relationship or interfaith marriage relationship is changing in British over the period of time. I mean, they presented the paper in a very unique way. So I would like to quote as Howard Spencer wrote, that the anthropologists do not just write. They wade into paddy fields, get sick and read bad novels rather than confront another day of mounting misapprehensions. They also take photographs, make films, and tape recordings. The fact that they mainly do it by themselves in strange places is another oddity. So sometimes it looks, so what you have to do, you have to make it, construct it, and then you have to understand it. So, so what I'll suggest to you, if you really want to be one of the, not I'll say experts, but as a good practitioners who suggest people and does himself and conducts himself research, taking a clue from ethnographic research, please read some people. So, for example, at Pioneer Work, Malinowski, as I said, Boas, and then Mead, then Douglas, who else? Levi-Strauss, who else? Dumont, and many more. No? So I'll keep on telling you. Now the question is, why should I read? Because if I want to understand the knowledge of other people's lives, okay, often during ethnographic fieldwork, never ceases to astonish. So sense of astonishment will come. Even studies that throw light upon alien practices and values often lead to self-examination, etc., etc. So at the same time, I'll say that ethnography is a type of qualitative research that gathers observations, interviews, documentary data to produce a detailed and comprehensive accounts of different social phenomena. Okay, so today you'll be surprised. I was just doing a comparative study that which field other than anthropology is using ethnographic research the most. And to my utter surprise, it's not today the social science friends, it's the medical education. I'll not say medical science, but the medical education people, they are using the most. So ethnographic research in medical education has produced a number of insightful accounts into its role, functions, and difficulties in the preparation of medical students for clinical practices. If you recall, very first day I said, when a doctor is examining a patient, right, instead of focusing on patient, according to the research results, they start focusing on the disease. People like us and others argue that yes, you have to cure the patient by treating or prescribing the treatment to the disease, but at the same time, you need to understand the patient. Why? It's not necessarily that the disease or the suffering of a particular disease by any human being may or may not be a result of only pathological reasons. It could be many other reasons. Sometimes it could be psychological, sometimes it could be sociological, sometimes it could be purely economic reasons, or sometimes it could be, on the coping reasons. I'm unable to cope, so I pretend, oh, I'm not well, I'm suffering from some diseases. And even that disease is not there, such kind of people develop certain kind of disease. When doctors examine such kind of people, they find, oh my God, nothing is wrong with this. But still that person will tend to visit doctors very frequently. And such things are being noticed in the family itself. Suppose a whole lot of work I have to do, and I'm overloaded by the work in my office. At the same time, my family is expecting to discharge many works, which I'm unable to do. So what I'll say, oh my God, I'm sick. I can't do this, because you don't know how to cope with the stresses that are being created. So not necessarily every time the disease that is there, or the presence of disease that is there in an individual patient, the reason may not be the pathological one. Anyway, ethnographic, as I said, it offers a way forward to help overcome these limitations of relying solely on a particular data. So it's a mixture of the data. So through the collection of observations, interviews, documentary data, and the best thing is that which are triangulated. What is triangulated in short? Because sometimes, we get confused by the jargons. Triangulated means compared and contrasted with one another. That is called triangulation. That's it. Triangulation is compared and contrasted with one another. So suppose more than 3 variables, or the 5 variables, or the 5 strategies, or the 5 things are there, you just compare and contrast and find out which one is the reason. So which are triangulated ethnographic research, and offers a qualitative approach with the potential to yield detailed and comprehensive account of different social phenomena. It could be actions, it could be behavior, it could be interactions, it could be beliefs, right? So this is what, in short, I wanted to share before I formally start presenting my slides, friends. So now what I'll be doing, first in first half, maybe 1 hour or so, I'll be presenting my presentation. And then one work I have, because I know the author personally, I have spent some amount of time, at least 10 days with this author. And we talked a lot about this. So I love to talk about this. And another work done by one of my seniors at Department of Education, University of Delhi, she also has done recently one work. And if time permits, I would love to talk and present the perspectives of both the authors when they actually worked in the field using ethnographic methods. Okay, so now please allow me, I'm presenting it, and then so friends, this is it. Yes, this is my presentation, because otherwise what will happen, it will become a regular class and I'll keep on talking. There will be no end to this. So what I'm going to do is, in this background, I'm going to define, or say I'm going to delimit the concept of the ethnographic. And then, as I said, I have 2 works with me. I don't know whether I'll be able to show it or not. But one work that I'll be talking is the life at school, and then its theoretical approach, and then how the author collected the field notes and how the author has written about it, because this is what you people wanted the most. But anyway, I think, to conduct a, maybe sometimes in future, I'll ask this author. Presently, she is abroad. When she comes back, we'll organize one workshop together, and maybe we'll be doing together. So let me start. So now, let me summarize what I have said from the ethnographic perspective. It's about studying an intact cultural group in a natural setting. That's it. So ethnography is an attempt to study an intact cultural group in a natural setting during a prolonged period of time. I mean, anthropologists, if you ask anthropologists or the people who use this methodology for their research, they will never ask you, they will never suggest you, rather I should say, to compromise with this. What's that? Prolonged period of time. So you can look at this ethnography in two contexts. One, studying an intact cultural group in a natural setting. Then the question is how? And as far as the how is concerned, during a prolonged period of time. For example, suppose I want to understand the personal, social, and political interactions of teachers in a specific schools. Or suppose I want to understand, I know if from the management point of view, understanding the personal, social, and even political interactions of the salesman in a particular organizations, or the sales executive in the particular organizations, or the top level executives in a particular organization. Fine. So the two main thing is, number one, your intention is to study an intact cultural group in a natural setting, right? Number one. And number two, during a prolonged period of time. And it could be anything, not necessarily confined to X, Y, and Z. It could be anything. So maybe the interaction among the people in a village, in a slum, in a school, in a university, in a college, marketplace, but in a natural setting, right? Go there and observe them. Like if you have to collect the data from the shopkeepers, all right, don't collect it when they are at home. Go and see yourself in their shops. Similarly, the behavior of the people in a marketplace, in a market or cinema hall or anything else, right? People are, today people are interested in that. Like I remember when Olympic was to be organized in European countries, even in Japan, people reported that as far as the Indian behavior is concerned, they were said the moment they land at the airport, please deal with them carefully. You know what typical behavior on the part of Indians has been observed is that they are most impatient people in the world. It's a different question why Indians are considered the most impatient people. There could be n number of reasons, but that reasons you can only be able to tell to the world when you actually study the behaviors of Indians at the marketplace, railway station, bus stand, airports, or different places. Why impatience? Like many people, whenever I get a chance to visit abroad and people do ask me and others about this behavior, we say there is a reason behind this. It's not people, tend to do this because it's their natural mindset. No, there are reasons, but this is not the right time to go into that debate. Possible reason could be the scarcity of the things. Possible reason could be that always we live in a scarce. Oh my God, I should reach there, otherwise things will vanish. No? Or you do one particular study at, very small study, and choose 5 or 10 railway stations in India and do a comparative study of the human behavior, or 4 or 5 educational institutions and do a comparative study of, or even on the ethnographic study of the behavior of that group. You'll be surprised to see, at least in India, okay, things as, even they know there are 64 seats in a compartment, railway compartment, sleeper class, right? And everybody has got reservation in his or her hand. And then you ask them to enter and see the kind of धक्का-मुक्की there. आप जब उनके व्यवहार को देखेंगे तो जितने लोग उस 2 दरवाजे के सामने खड़े हैं, सबको पता है कि 1 महीने पहले या 1.5 महीने पहले उन्होंने रिजर्वेशन करा लिया, लेकिन जब उनको स्टेशन पे जैसे ही ट्रेन खड़ी होती है और पता है कि 15 मिनट का टाइम है, लेकिन वो 15 सेकंड इंतजार नहीं करना चाहेंगे। उनको ये भी पता है कि उनकी सीट रिजर्व है, लेकिन स्टिल वो इम्पेशेंट है, स्टिल एक एंजाइटी है दिमाग में, मेरी सीट कोई और ना ले ले। Like I remember that I was participating in a debate and I said, even the corruption का कारण यही है कि 5 सीटें हैं और 10 लोग हैं, तो किसी और को उन्हें मिल जाए, हमें मिल जाना चाहिए. So wrong route they take. You know? So it could be n number of reasons. I'm not an expert in that. So 2 things. 1, studying an intact culture group in a natural setting, and second, during a prolonged period of time. And it could be anything. It could be understanding the personal interactions, social interactions, political interactions of individuals in a specific location or in a specific cultural context. For example, I belong to the field of education, so I would like to study in school, in college, university, or in coaching classes. Why mushrooming, etc., etc. So culture, then it's very important to understand, and I will try to understand in a very, very limited way. As I said in my first statement was that it is the study of a particular culture. What is culture? So culture, I mean, hundreds of definitions are there. It is shared patterns of beliefs, fundamentally. Culture is a shared patterns of beliefs, number 1. Second, normative expectations. Third, behaviors and meanings. But the key factor is the shared, not individualistic. Individual's point of view, individual behavior, right? Individual norm, you cannot say it's a culture. Only the shared pattern of beliefs, only the shared normative expectations, only the shared behaviors and the shared meanings can be labeled as culture. So fundamentally, it's a shared, not individualistic, right? Now, second important point is that how to identify and enter the research site. No? Once I have decided, suppose I want to study the socio-political and personal interactions of students and teachers in Aurobindo International Education Society. Why? Because their setup, their context, their curriculum, everything, even in its philosophy, they are completely different one. Like there is a one school I know, they will never give you any homework. They don't believe in homework in Delhi, because India is a very peculiar place. You'll find a variety of schools and people from a variety of institutions are coming up and they are doing wonderful things. Right, friends? So, second important is, suppose I have already identified and no pre-identified objectives or hypotheses. I'll enter into the field. I'll start behaving like a participant observation. And then after spending some time, I'll develop some research questions. Or maybe even by the end of my research writing, right, I have all the freedom as a researcher to revise my research questions, like people do in the field of science research, right? They nothing identify anything in advance. I have always made this point that please try to understand. You are saying that you are trying to make your research study as scientific research study. Try to understand that how that scientific research study is being conducted. No? Okay. By scientists, science researchers into this. So identifying, and then my job will be to identify. So I know there is in Pondicherry, Arvindo International Education Center, and there is a school, and I want to study that. So how to identify and entering the research site. So here research site is the actual site. And for that, what is needed is called the foreshadowed problem. It means a general framework for beginning a qualitative study. Okay, so a specific question or a question that emerge from the interactive relationship between the problem and data, not the research question, what is there in your mind already. No. So a question that, or the questions that emerge from the interactive relationship between the problem and data. So often found embedded in the data analysis. So changing nature of questions often necessitates changes in the design or otherwise also, right? Because you're changing the designs of the research question will, and that's why if you are keen to use ethnographic research method, then your design will be known as not a fixed design as it is expected in a quantitative paradigm of research or the positivist paradigm of research, but in post-positivist paradigm of research, in the qualitative paradigm of research, it is called emergent design. Everything emerges, nothing is fixed. Then I'll be talking a little bit about the problem statements. Access to all parts of the site. For example, the participants, documents, physical locations, etc. Yes, sometimes it's very difficult. Like maybe some of the documents that particular institution will never allow you to access. But as a researcher, you will have to strive hard to have access to data. And if you are capable to convince them, see, I'm using this, or I'll be using this only for the the sole purpose of you using this document is for my research. Maybe some people will at the same time, maybe some institution will not give you, but access to not only the site, but also access to all parts of the site. What does it mean? It means access to all sorts of participants or all actors who are there in that particular institution, all documents, not only the books or the syllabus, but also the notebooks of the students, notebooks of the teachers, notebooks of the administrators, or some registers kept in the office, etc., etc. And of course, the physical locations, all physical locations. Like always, I have wondered, how come it is possible in that, except 4 days out of 365, all the 361, or maybe 350, whatever it is, all the students are there on the playground, in a year out of 365, suppose 360 or even 350, every year, every student is supposed to be there. Why the same is not practiced other than the play schools or sports schools? Why is it so? Why and how it happens? So all of physical locations, it's not only the inside the classroom, but the playground plus the gym. I mean, I was amazed to see the things, right? And more important is how to establish the rapport. And rapport need to be integrated within the site to gain the trust of the participants. If you don't have the skill to establish good rapport with all the actors of the site, I don't think you will be able to really capture the essence of that community or that institution and its culture in totality. So often site entry takes friends. I mean, that's one of the weaknesses of this, particularly that's why PhD level people, evade not to enter into a research which demands ethnography research. So often site entry takes a very, very long time. Very, very long time. Because the moment you'll say, we want to study this, why do you want to study this? but we'll get out of this study. Why should I allow you? Etc. Like I tell you, I was writing for my MA dissertation. I did my study on the concept of reasoning, and my research problem was a study of use of reasonings by teachers in teaching. कि जब एक शिक्षक कक्षा में पढ़ाता है या पढ़ाती है किसी भी विषय को, तो उसमें तर्क का प्रयोग कितना करती है ये मेरा नहीं था, कैसे करती है और कब कब करता है और करती है. So when a teacher teaches a particular subject, not necessarily only mathematics, physics, chemistry, bio, computer science, etc., but even history or the civics or the geography or even the language, right? When and how the teacher uses the reasoning. Because all study, all teaching points to cognitively development of the logical and reasoning ability of the student. And this is what I wanted to study. So we had questionnaire, observation schedule, and interview schedule, all the three. And I took and I was supposed to take the sample from the West Delhi, Janakpuri and surrounding. And I had identified almost 10 to 15 schools. So very senior teachers used to say when I used to request them, please allow me to sit in your class. They said, how come? You're a student and I have been teaching in this class since last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. How dare you will observe my class, whether I'm teaching good or bad? So I had to convince them, sir, I'm not going to observe you to judge whether your teaching is good or bad. My purpose is completely different. Then he or she used to ask, what's your purpose? And literally, so I used to explain. Some of the teachers, they were kind enough because they had done MA themselves. So they used to allow me, okay, you can come and sit in my class. But some of the, a majority of them, they allowed, thanks to all the teachers who allowed me to observe their class to collect my data. But many teachers said outrightly no. Even principal requested. They said no, no. It's my personal space. And they were right. It's not that they were wrong. They were right to some great extent, because the pedagogic space in which a teacher operates himself or herself, to a great extent, that's his or her personal space. Though, why I'm saying personal space? Because only the two kind of actors are allowed in that space. One, he himself or she herself, and another the students as a unit. That's it. Ideally, no one should be allowed to enter into that space. But yes, unless someone allows the third one, how can the outer world can understand what actually goes inside the classroom? Why? Because teacher is teaching and students are learning. But suppose I want to understand that a teacher is logically and in terms of reasoning very sound, but does he or she use this? And if he or she uses this, how frequently, in what manner? Number one. And number two, once he or she uses this, does that act affect the logical ability, the reasoning power, and the power of students or not? Otherwise, it's of no use. Like particularly in mathematics, when we write the general aims of teaching mathematics, we were told, and still we are telling to the students, to develop the logical ability of the students, or the reasoning power or the logical power of the students, or the rational logical power of the students. But do you really check that what you are teaching, those components, those methodologies, and those strategies do help students to develop the logical ability and the reasoning ability? And that's why the entrance of the third actor into the site, though that site you may call the pedagogical space within the boundary, not within the four walls of a classroom, because pedagogical site may not be delimited or confined to only the four walls of the classroom. It's outside that also, but at least until unless you allow the third actor, nothing can be observed. So somebody has to witness that, what actually is going on. But yeah, remember, so one of the biggest weaknesses of this is that that often site entry takes a very, very long time. Okay, now what I'm going to do, friends, I'm going to so instead of I would like to show you, I don't know whether you are in a position to see me or not. This is the book, this is the work, Ethnographic Study. And I know the author personally. She was, before joining, just to study this, she took the, what you call it, deputation in Department of Education, University of Delhi. Actually, she's professor of sociology at Delhi School of Economics. And so what, instead of talking this, I would like to talk about this, how this author, because I have spent quite some time with this author very leisurely to understand that what actually she did when she decided to study the life of the students, and particularly the students in the school, which is based on the philosophy of J. Krishnamurti. Okay, so this is what I have decided to share with you. And so coming half an hour, I'll be presenting this, and then half an hour, different shades of this. So let me start with the study that today I'm going to focus, life at school. If you look at this work, once this work was completed, and this work has been published by Oxford India Press, or you say Oxford University Press in India. And perhaps the copy that I have in my hand and which I see, and I suggest people in the field of education that first edition, it was published, you'll be surprised, in the year 1991. And then this Oxford came out with paperback editions when this book became very popular in the year 2006. Earlier also. So, why do I do? Because I have spent some time, as I told you, with the author of this work, and the name of the author is Meenakshi Thapan. As I said, she is primarily a professor of sociology in Delhi School of Economics. And when I was in 93, 94, I was in Department of Education, University of Delhi. That time she got the deputation from Delhi School of Economics to Department of Education. And she said, now I have done this study, so I should teach sociology of education. So we studied at AMET level and level from a person who was a sociologist by training, but had done the study, conducted an ethnographic study in the area of education. So name of this work is Life at School, an Ethnographic Study. And that's why I thought that I have such kind of 5 to 6 works with me, but this is the work which is very popular. So I thought, why not I should talk. And moreover, maybe something, the personal characteristics of the researcher, because I have spent time with her, so I'll be able to do justice when I'm presenting my ideas. When you will look at this work, many of you might have studied, but today we'll try to look at this work, not what is written and what is there or not. Try to see how this work has been presented to the world. To the world means to me, to you, and to us all. Okay, so what as it happens, I'm not going to talk about introduction, what she has written, or the preface, what she was written, or introduction to the edition, what she has written. No, the first chapter is introduction. Okay, one by one I'll discuss. Let me first present the one. So introducing the problem. So this is the first, introducing the problem. Secondly, she talks about ideology and education, Krishnamurti's worldview and educational thought. See, it is ethnographic study. So first, she writes the introducing the problem, life at school. Okay, this was our main title, but the title with which this work has been published is Life at School and Ethnographic Study. Secondly, she writes ideology and education, Krishnamurti's worldview and education. You must be surprised, why is it so? Because she knew in advance when she entered into the site, she realized, oh, this is cool, or in advance also, before even entering into the site. So depending upon the context, it's not only anything, nothing is fixed in this, that, oh, this school operates itself on the basis of the philosophy of Krishnamurti. इसलिए जब वो सबसे पहले इस प्रॉब्लम को इंट्रोड्यूस कर देती हैं, तो उनको लगता है कि मुझे जिस फिलॉसफी और जिस आइडियोलॉजी पे स्कूल अपने को ऑपरेट करता है, पहले मुझे उसकी बात करनी चाहिए। वो बहुत जरूरी है, जबकि एथनोग्राफिक स्टडी है। सपोज जैसे मैंने उदाहरण दिया आपको कि श्री अरविंदो एजुकेशनल इंस्टीट्यूशन का कोई करता है, या सपोज कि कोई स्कूल गिजू भाई बधेका के प्रिंसिपल पे चलता है, या इंडिया में मान लीजिए मैं स्टडी करना चाहता हूं कि वर्धा में जो बेसिक स्कूल आज भी चल रहा है, वर्धा, आई हैव स्पेंट सम टाइम in Bardha, you know, and I used to love to go to that school. The setting, school as a structural, social structure, it's completely different. It's amazing. I would like to share with you, I saw one teacher arranging the shoes and the slippers of the students by his or her own hand. And then I asked that teacher that your job is to teach, but why you are arranging their slippers and the shoes, which were kept, because nothing is in a disciplinary oriented, imposed upon the students. I said, I want my students to see that if I arrange something systematically, it occupies a less space. Number one. Number two, many other qualities they will develop. I'm telling you, when I interacted with the teachers, far deeper insights I got, because what I used to do, I used to ask my all B.Ed students, 50 students, along with different faculty, members of the faculty, to go there and spend at least 1 week, just to observe. Nothing was given that you have to do this, you have to do that. No, just observe, just be there and see what things are going on. That's it. Just go and spend time, that's it. And then in the end, we people used to sit, because Vardha Ashram is a good location there. And then we used to sit and we used to discuss with students, with all the faculty and the students, that what you have observed, what you have seen, how do you find some of the things that are in practice here, that are prevalent here, that are different from the schools in which you got schooled or you got education. And so, from the observational point of view, each student used to describe things in a different way. Or suppose, so, Gandhi's worldview and educational thought, or Aurobindo's worldview and education. Or suppose I'm conducting an ethnographic study of the summer school. Well, many have done already. That school is still going on in England, established by A.S. Neil and his colleagues. So it's a very important, if you really want to understand the location and the site, to understand the philosophy, the setting. Okay, so what this researcher has done is that after introducing the problem, she has written Ideology and Education, colon, this is the main title, and then she writes Krishnamurti's Worldview and Educational Thought. Okay, then she writes School Organization. Now see, when in paper 3, I have taught this paper, School Organization, for a long, very long period of time. Today when people look at the educational administrators or the educational policy planners, school as an organization from a very different perspective. But see, this author writes school organization, the transcendental and the local orders, which is always missing in the policy documents of India. Why? Because we think that the school has been organized and the organization of the school operates in a universal way, which actually is not. And that's why this author decided School Organization, that's the main title, and subtitle is The Transcendental and the Local Orders. I'll talk about that. First time, I'm just presenting before you. See, suppose, when a researcher conducted this research, now it's time to reporting that research to the research audience, me, you, and others, and see how things are presented. Because when I talk to her, I think, do you think, can I ask you, do you know that when initially you entered into the field and you might have thought that the school organization in that way? She said, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I thought that the school organization is a singleton organization structure. But she wrote the transcendental and the local orders. The next she writes school culture. Many times unconsciously or consciously, when we students, we teachers, we researchers behave in a particular manner or in a particular way, it's not necessarily the result of my thinking only. It could be the kind of culture that you have imbibed in yourself from the institution from where you have got the education. और इसीलिए मैं बार बार कहता हूं कि आप कैसे व्यक्ति होंगे, ये सिर्फ इस बात पर निर्भर नहीं करेगा कि आप कितना शिक्षित हैं, नहीं, इस बात पर निर्भर करेगा कि आप कैसे अपने को आपने शिक्षित किया है, कहां से किया है, किस संस्कृति में किया है, क्योंकि उसी की सोच और उसी की बिहेवियर आपको प्रभावित करता है. So what I said in India, I would like to say that, how, you behave in a particular educational context, that will depend on from where you have got the education. Even your thinking, behavioral expression will depend on that. And that's why she decides to write the next chapter, next topic, school culture. And see, and specifically she chose the subtitle as Rituals and Ceremonies. There is no school in the world which is without ritual and which is without any ceremony. But why a particular school celebrates a particular ceremony in a particular way or unique way? Why? Because see, as human race, as a descendant of Homo sapiens, evolved culturally also. And when culture revolution take place, culture, as I said, the shared values, the shared rituals, shared ceremonies, all these form the part of the culture, concretely as well as abstractly. मूर्त और अमूर्त रूप से चीजें उसको प्रभावित करती हैं। उसमें जितनी चीजें होते हैं वो सब संस्कृति का हिस्सा होता है. So I'm thinking of that. Why not I should study the institutional culture in India? That how the institutional culture of a particular institution is completely different from others. Okay. Then she writes teacher culture, professional and ideologue teachers. So as far as the teacher culture of this institution is considered, she has deliberated professional and ideologue teachers. She might have noticed that some teachers, they are the purely ideological teachers based on ideologies. But some are, though they are teaching in a school which is based on the philosophy of J. Krishnamurti, but they are purely professional. Professional means as it is expected from the teacher. And then she writes teacher interaction, teacher-pupil interaction, teacher interaction first. So teacher interaction, so two kinds of interaction she has discussed in this chapter, that is the formal and informal. And then the pupil culture. So school culture, teacher culture, pupil culture. But I don't know why she has arranged teacher interaction first and the pupil culture later on, but anyway. And as far as the pupil culture is concerned, the subheading is an ensemble of relations. And finally, she writes teacher-pupil interaction. And when she entered into the site and when she came out of the site after having thorough access to various documents at the site, she decided to write teacher-pupil interactions in the form of freedom and constraint. And lastly, she writes about the concluding comments. So there are two ways to present this work in front of you. One could be that I should talk of this book. Another could be that let me first complete this. Okay, what are the things she has presented as a concluding comments, and then one by one I'll discuss with you. So concluding comments, and in that concluding comments, in that chapter, she writes paradoxicality. Why paradoxicality? You'll be surprised to see, though that, this is researcher's observation point of view. I have nothing to comment that this, but from the researcher's point of view, she observed that there is a paradox. Why paradox? Then the author writes, or maybe let me first talk about the components and then I'll talk about what's that. Secondly, informality is the defining factors. This is the second component has emerged in the section of concluding remarks. Informality is the defining factors. Third, clash of ideologies. But the best thing that I liked about is in the concluding section when she writes about relationality. And one thing more that this author has highlighted in this section, only 10 pages, concluding remarks consist of from page number 201 to perhaps 211 to 219, 8 to 10 pages, interactions between ideologies and education. I'll talk about that. So a genuine dialectic of ideologies should produce synthesis. This is what she's trying to convince. Now see, do you think that when you enter in a school, when you enter into a school, without, can you imagine all these things until unless you interact with the site or the different actors at the site? No. But see, so paradoxicality, informality is the defining factors, clash of ideologies, relationality, interactions between ideologies and education, and lastly, which really I like, that is a genuine dialectic of ideologies should produce synthesis that the researcher has highlighted. Now, apart from this, now let me first talk about the theoretical approach, otherwise some of the important components will get. So let me first complete this, and then I'll come back to the actual study, that what she did and how she did, and when she tried to write the observation in a research language or in a rhetoric, which is essential to be given importance in writing the research, as I said very first day, and what kind of things they kept in, she kept in mind, and what are the, and how she has depicted that, that I'll discuss. So externally observable social reality. So the theoretical approach that she has taken, or anybody can take, when he or she decides that he or she is going to use what you call ethnographic research as a research methodology. So externally observable social reality, interpretive understanding to examine subjective point of view. If you want to understand a subjective point of view, then you'll have to think in terms of interpretive understanding. Okay, only then you will be able to examine the subjective point of view. Third, a world of everyday life. See, though we live in a world, but there is another world within us, and every day in the world you live, or everyday life in the world you live. So what is that world of everyday life? Okay, in a particular context related to particular cultural group. So here, students, teachers, administrators in this school is considered one cultural contact group. So the perception of, and then intersubjectivity is very important. Next point, which is very important, is the perception of one another in different settings and situations, and which are dialectical in nature, right? So it's not only the subjective point of view, but the intersubjectivity, both are important. And therefore, the perceptions of one another in different settings and situations are very important. And that's why the dialectic nature of that cultural setting is very important. So interactionist approach to study the school. And when you take the interactionist approach to study the school, means interactionist approach to study the organizations, it could be, or the program, it could be anything. As I said, in this context, it is the school. Then when she writes about the note on fieldwork, and she writes that intelligible in sociological terms. Why? Because her background is basically sociological in nature. So she had this in mind, that when I'll be writing after observations, spending long period of time there, then it should be, I mean, maybe sociologists would like to study, so it should be expressive enough for the people who belong to the sociological world. And that's why saying intelligible in sociological terms. But suppose my background is educational, no, and I know my work primarily, who will read my paper, my work, or who will study my paper, or who will be my client in. And if I have this in my background, at the back of my mind, that people who are working in the field of colleges, universities of education, department of education, or institutions of education, they will read. So I'll write from the perspective of intelligible in educational terms. As she says that intelligible in sociological terms, because that time she hadn't decided, or she was not sure whether she will take deputation from Delhi School of Economics of the Department of Sociology to Department of Education of University of Delhi, right? Then she said censorship and control. Okay, she has specifically written about the difficulty in gaining entry into the school. I told you it's very difficult sometimes, very difficult, right? the antipathy, all these things. Then she also talks about the lack of clarity, immersion into school. But once you go into the site, and suppose you have given free access to the site, and they all accept you as one of the community member or as an intact cultural group, then how do you immerse yourself into the site? And as I said, site could be anything. Yeah, site could be anything. It could be a slum, it could be village, it could be marketplace, it could be a railway station, it could be anything else. But in this case, it is the school, and that's why she writes about immersion into the school. And then impression management in the field, intimate and sustained observations. I mean, everything she's written. And that's why in ethnographic study, it's not necessarily what you observe that's important. All those things matter, right, which you did at the site. Therefore, she talks about the intimate and sustained observation, involved observations, informal conversations, good personal relations. Okay. And then yes, sometimes at the site you face some problems, and she calls it problems of selectivity. Then she talks about the uncovering the mask. So, but before I say thank you to all, now what I'll be doing, friends, one by one, I'll be talking about what's that. Okay. So first, let me start with this research work, and suppose, I mean, to have better insight, I'll suggest you, friends, that please read yourself, and don't only read simply. No? You read in a group. You must be doing group reading, like in this university and even earlier 2 universities. I had started a practice that in our tutorial group, which is generally once in a week, and suppose it is 1 hour, at least 20 to 25 minutes we people used to devote for group reading. So one person is reading a book, any book we used to take, which is related to education, and we used to study in a group. So suppose one para I have read, and I have asked others to reflect. Then suppose in my tutorial 10 students, another is reading. So group reading, and so I mean, my suggestion will be that please do the group reading, so that debate, discussion, and deliberation should take place, and record it, and then transcribe it. Oh, you'll see the marvelous idea will come out. Anyway, so when she writes introducing the problem, and when she writes introducing the problem, now I'm not going that when, how, and what was it that actually motivated her to do this. But I think that she was highly influenced by Krishnamurti's ideas, and she had access to Krishnamurti Foundation India, which is known as KFI. So she writes about the regeneration of Rishi Valley. Rishi Valley is the name of the school, Krishnamurti in praxis. And she has presented Krishnamurti Foundation's this. But what I liked about this chapter is introduction. So you all know that the Rishi Valley School is in southern India, run by Krishnamurti Foundation India. And what kind of questions she posed when she decided that I'm going to conduct this study in a Rishi Valley school, and I'm going to do an ethnographic study. She says, I pose regarding the internal organization and authority structure of the school. Number one, the nature of the school ethos, or the form and content of interpersonal relationship between different categories of actors in the school, the participants, are surely encountered in one form or another by the foundation members, the teachers, and the pupils. So their question, however, primarily seek information or guidance for action rather than an understanding of the school as a socio-cultural phenomenon through an interpretive effort. And she writes that such an effort to clarify what at first may seem obscure calls for a holistic view of the actors' externally observable behavior as well as of their perception of their own social situation and of the school as a social reality. More precisely, what she's trying to convey is that the effort is to render the educational institutions intelligible sociologically. Like, who says, you all know, particularly those who have studied sociology of education, you must have studied school is a miniature form of society. No? So how to understand or how to make school as an organization intelligible sociologically, and that is in terms of certain selected sociological paradigms of social reality at both the social level as well as the institutional level. This is what she has written, right? And so she attempted to do this through a ethnographic study of the Rishi Valley School. So this was the main question in her mind. Okay, so then you need to, because there are a number of various purposes of conducting ethnographic study, and she has highlighted in the introduction that the ethnographic method imposes certain obligations. What are those? The first is, as far as the ethnographic in a school setting is concerned, to see the social structure of the school, the necessity to do intensive field work through involved observation followed by thick description. I repeat, involved observation followed by thick description, not simply description, thick description. So the ethnographic narrative also does not allow for a meaningful comparative perspective, as it is essentially an in-depth approach focusing on a particular case. So it is possible that several structural changes as well as transformations in the ambience of Rishi Valley schools have taken place, because it started in 1981. Almost 8 to 10 years had passed, but following sociological conventions. And that's why she said that she has used ethnographic research method throughout. Anyway, but see what she says. And then she writes the technological world of the school, psychological world, Krishnamurti's education thought with its emphasis on harmony between what he calls the technological world and the psychological world. This is what Krishnamurti says, no? I'll suggest even those who want to understand education in terms of social structure, please read this chapter very carefully. Even if I haven't studied J. Krishnamurti, you'll observe that what amount of, my perception is that, as she reported to me, for 6 months she studied only Krishnamurti's educational philosophy, wherever she got the access. And then she has summarized in a wonderful way. And this is what is the challenge. And that's why time and again, friends, I suggest to the budding researcher, please develop a habit of reading a lot. Get access to various materials, whether it is directly related or not, even indirectly related or not, right? Please read that. So it appears to be crucial to the comparative pedagogic practices, today, the contemporary pedagogic practices, that tend to emphasize the former to the virtual neglect of the learner. So what is happening? Technological world is more important than the psychological world of the individual. So the human being is not only an individual for Krishnamurti, but more importantly, an individual in relationship to society. Like psychology has emphasized that each individual is a unique individual. But see, from the sociological perspective, even Krishnamurti in his philosophy, has emphasized that the human being is not only, because she has to study whom? Individual student in a collective form, in a sociological structure. To understand the educational structure, which school generally represent. And that's why it was very essential on the part of the researcher to understand how Krishnamurti or how the philosophy of Krishnamurti perceives and conceives, right, the individual in a society. And that's why she has written, the human being is not only an individual, but more importantly, an individual in relationship to society. Now, you'll say, what is its implication? Implication is, do you think that our any curriculum, any syllabus, when it is formulated, keeping this in mind? We develop the, the contents of the syllabus keeping subject or the discipline in mind, not the subjects for whom this subject is developed. If I am preparing a syllabus of mathematics, and this is what I have advocated time and again, after all the syllabus of physics or the chemistry or the bio or the history or the geography or any discipline, you are developing for what purpose? For the subject itself or for the subjects to whom you are going to impart this? Subject which is subset of the discipline or the subject who is going to study this? And therefore, it's very important for the subject whom you are developing a particular subject X, Y, Z, you should not forget that an individual, who is a subject, who is an individual, he is not only an individual in himself or herself, but more importantly, an individual in relationship to society. So she wanted to see, okay, let me go and observe this, whether this thing is there in the school life or life at school or not. And then she has written, if therefore the school seeks to provide an environment for the nurture or development of certain qualities in its pupil, there will only, this will only contribute to eventual social transformation rather than mere individual absorption that is so often feared by critics of the school. And then, this work, the work that we are discussing right now, basically, though it is ethnography in its methodological approach, is an attempt to examine the interaction between ideas and institutions. What does it mean when I say this? It means, what is the relationship between ideology and education as such? You'll be surprised to know, friends, and that's why when you claim that this school is based on the ideology of Krishnamurti, that itself is a self-contradictory. People don't like when I make this statement. People say, why do you say this? Why do you say this? So idea of Marx, fine. But when Marx ideology, you say, or Marxism, you say, that's a completely polluted one. Completely polluted one. Not only it delimits the idea of that thinker, but also it becomes a kind of, what you'll say, religion, which is a dogmatic, which becomes orthodox in its setting, etc., etc. This is time to talk about this. Then see, so it means, what is the relationship between ideology and education as such? So the relationship between the individual and the institution with society is there for what? Everybody has said, dialectical in nature. But I have asked you a question, that why people like me and others, when they say that the very moment you say that this school is based on the ideology of Krishnamurti is contradictory. Please think about that. Why I'm making this statement. Suppose as a researcher, if I write like that. Okay, so I mean, this researcher has observed that what should I say? That the school is not merely a physical or an ideological construction. Its reality is also constructed by teachers and pupils through their everyday lives in the school. So the school does not only exist as an institution out there, as it were, but acquires a social reality from the meanings brought to it by the participants through their interactions and everyday lives in that school. Now, what does it signify? What the researcher, after spending a long period of time in that school, interacting with various actors at the site, what she wants to convey? Or suppose you are the researcher, if you are asked that you need to convey in a language from the educational point of view, or from the sociological point of view, or from any point of view, that which generally when you enter at the site, you don't find. You cannot observe with naked eyes. But when you observe, you develop the theme, the pattern, and then you apply a particular context or particular paradigm in which you are going to talk about for a particular people, then you have to write in such a way that what is not so obvious in terms of observation, you have to convey. I'll give you one meaning. Like such a view of the school attempts to go beyond previous constructions of the school and the educational processes in India that have tended to exclude the voices of the major participants in that process. You know, usually you think school is that which I understand, or school is that which bureaucrat understand, or school is that which common people understand. Don't you think the school is that which the actors of the school understand? I'll give you a good example. And she writes in her book that the sociologists of education in India have tended to look at educational process largely in terms of their internal and external dynamics, discuss somewhat loosely as the social background of the teachers, students' politics in higher education, problems of university administration, educational goals in relation to social development, and so on and so forth. All these problems indicate a concern with issues that are perhaps necessary to identify the social linkages with the educational process in general. While an understanding of these links is indeed important, it is quite obvious that there is a lack of interest in theoretical principles as informing the problematic of educational process in India. This is what she writes. And just to understand that, she did this study. And to this study, she didn't rely on any quantitative measures or any other research methodologies. So no, this can be understood only with the help of ethnography research methods. In short, what I want to say is this, that what life at school is all about. What life at school is all about. Or suppose if you want to understand what life is at the college is all about, or what life is at the university is all about. Okay, so and to understand that, what is important? The subjective meanings of the actors, and that's why she has written, the subjective meanings are individual and collective orientations based on varying motivations, interests, and intentions. Okay? And only then you will be able to understand quality of a living reality. जीवन तो हर कोई जीता है, नहीं जीवन, लेकिन जो जीवन जी रहे हैं, जिसको हम कहते हैं हम जीवन को जी रहे हैं, क्या वो जी रहे हैं या कुछ और है? ठीक से देखेंगे तो लगेगा कि वो जीवन कट रहा है, जी कहाँ रहे? जीवन जीना तो शायद कुछ और है, और वो तब होगा जब क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ को नहीं देखना होगा, क्वालिटी ऑफ लिविंग इन रियलिटी देखना पड़ेगा, जिसको आप शॉर्ट में कह सकते हैं क्वालिटी ऑफ ए लिविंग रियलिटी, लाइफ एंड लिविंग रियलिटी. So in the introductory chapter, I mean, she proposes that what she intended to do that. And as I said, in the second part, she writes about the ideology and education, Krishnamurti's worldview and educational thought. No? And here, it's an amazing chapter. I'll suggest, friends, though this is based on, not only the based on ethnographic observations or ethnographic study, but it indicates that what amount of study just to write 9 pages or 10 pages, friends, only 10 pages, right, requires on the part of ethnographic researcher. Please read that. Page number 8 to, it's only 19-20 pages. And I think that demands at least 6 months of work. So when she was trying to understand ideology and education from the perspective of Krishnamurti's worldview and educational thought, very clearly the researcher has written that her concern with ideology stems from what may be viewed as its major characteristics, which is its call for the unity of theory and practice, a positive alternative to the existing pattern of society and its culture. Now, you ask people, what is an ideology? Theoretically, in terms of theory, not in terms of praxis. So ideology may be seen as a generative concept in as much as it is not only a description of a way of life, but also generates action towards fulfilling it. So you'll be surprised to see when you read Krishnamurti, and that's a paradoxicality, read that, you'll find, I mean, even all these institutions which they claim that they are operating on the basis of the philosophy of Krishnamurti, but they are, presenting a paradox to their students, to their teachers, and as an institution itself. And you all know, I don't need to tell you time and again, that education is such a social process which is permeated with the ideology, explicitly or implicitly. Isn't it? But see Krishnamurti's life himself. I mean, he himself has denounced that. So people say, okay, what is ideology of Krishnamurti? People say, ideology refers to Krishnamurti's philosophy as contained in his writings and talks. But very few people understand. But as a researcher, you will have to understand, if they even, because they are not the researcher, you are the researcher, that the Krishnamurti himself, however, repudiates the role of philosopher or representative of one system of conceptual thinking or ideology. He stresses his distrust of ideology, stating that all ideas are idiotic. You'll be surprised to see. And when you'll concentrate on this statement, all of a sudden you realize, my God, Paul Freire in his book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, perhaps in the very first chapter or the second chapter, states the similar kind of thinking. But his tone is slightly different. He hasn't dared to say that all ideologies are idiotic, whether religious or political, for its conceptual thinking, the conceptual world, which has, because he thought that, oh, ideologies divide people, unity lacks. And in a similar tone, and that's why I'm saying reading will help you. Like if I would have been the researcher, I would have written here that in a similar tone and texture, with slight different stand, Freire says, neither follow the right nor the left, because they are going to hamper your thinking ability. Read his work. And that's why Krishnamurti is not concerned with abstract formulations or arguments, but with thought in praxis, as it were, as he urges the individual to immediate action, right? And that's what I'm saying, to enter before the sight. Even when you have entered the sight, you know, the challenging task is, on the one hand, you're trying to understand his ideologies, and on the other, actually you have to observe what's going on. And then she has written about the Krishnamurti's worldview, and particularly the essential elements. And then she writes about the teaching. And as far as the teaching from the Krishnamurti's point of view, the most significant aspect of Krishnamurti's definition of his own role is his complete disavowal of authority. The individual usually turns to an external agency, for example, God, an ideal, a guru, a teacher, for a revelation of the right path and for instructions for living. And that's why perhaps Krishnamurti questions whether such authority can actually initiate individual perception and change. And that's why I would like to share with you, in the words of the researcher and the author, according to Krishnamurti, authority is in any form, in fact, breeds insecurity and fear because of the individual's dependence upon the source of authority. And it is therefore necessary that the journey of understanding has to be made by oneself, which means that one has to discard every kind of authority. To be a light to be a light to ourselves, we must be free of all traditions, all authority, including that of the Krishnamurti. And that's why, you know, I make such kind of statements. Why he's saying so? Because Krishnamurti has said that so that our own minds can look and observe and learn. Now, on the one hand, you are advocating that your school is operating on the basis of the ideals of Krishnamurti. And on the other, you'll find, I mean, when you are making this statement, such statements themselves are contradictory, full of inherent contradictions. But anyway, so please read this book, and because time doesn't permit me to find out and to discuss each and everything. As I told you, that workshop requires a whole lot of things. Only then you will understand how, when you observe how things are written, once you have spent prolonged period of time with the actors at the site, and then every day you make a note, you observe the phenomena, observe the interactions, in the form of observations, interviews, analysis of the documents, etc., etc. And then how do you write? Okay, because it's a school setting. Similarly, suppose if there is any person who is teaching management, for them I'll say, take any brand or any organization as a cultural unit, enter into the site and see. Like, I don't know if I have shared this with you, no, or not. Like, I remember in 2012, perhaps, all about, I was teaching a paper called Human Ethics and Values in Management. So in my class, there were 120 students, 40 students from market management, marketing, 40 from the finance, and 40 were from the HRs. And then one day, I don't know what motivated my vice chancellor. He asked me, Dr. Jha, why don't you teach this paper to our management students? Because my vice chancellor was from the discipline of management. He says, I don't mind. But I told him that I'll not, teach this paper the way you people have been teaching, and the way then but the beauty about that university was that every individual teacher had freedom to, structure his or her syllabus according to his or own understanding. So I prepared a syllabus and I shared it with the dean of the school. And then I wanted to share, because he himself had been a professor of management 25 years. He said, okay, it is entirely up to you. So one day I read something about Zara. Zara is an apparel brand, and that time he became all of a sudden the second richest man in the world. It's an apparel company, apparel brand. And I read something that why and how it became so famous, how the owner of the Zara could earn so much from its apparel brand. So I read some philosophy. I said, okay, let me take the Zara brand as a case, and let me discuss that brand and that institution from the perspective of human ethics and values. Yeah, it was very exciting and interesting. So then, the head of department of the market management, just like my younger brother and my friend, I suggested him that you take this brand not as a case, take this brand or this as an institution, as a cultural site, enter into the site, and then do the study that what the honor or the philosophy of this institution has advocated. Do the actors who are acting at the site, they act on the basis of those principles or something else? If they act, I mean, what is the relationship between the two? And it's amazing. It's amazing, friends. It's an amazing philosophy. On the basis of that, this brand has, operated itself. And that's the phenomenal success. I'm not saying that since it is a success, that's why the philosophy is amazing. But the way this brand has captured the psyche of the buyer, particularly it's a American brand. Now it's available in India also. But I have visited several times in the outlets of these two brands in the US also and here also, just to understand that, because I had opportunity, because they have some outlets in New York. And so I was stationed at New York for 10 days. So I had a chance to go to different, outlets there and nearby states of US and here also. You can study the life at institutions, life at a particular apparel brand, life at anything. That's why I said that. Anyway, now let me talk about from the organization point of view, because when I talk about the second chapter, I become so passionate. I forget that I have to complete and talk about the other things also that came in her mind. So the third entity she has written about the school organization, and you will be surprised. You know, the usual understanding of the organization as the usual understanding of the school as a social structure is completely different one. And the way, you know, researcher and the thinker look at this. So school organization, but more catching or more important is the subheadings of this. And she writes the transcendental and the local orders. When you read this, chapter, I mean, see the things, the kind of things she has written. I don't think that any sociologist, because my favorite sociologist from the sociology of education point of view is Basil Bernstein. And there are others also, but Basil Bernstein's understanding of sociology of education is completely different one. So it's amazing one. And she starts this chapter with this writing that the most significant aspect of social organization in RVS Rishi Valley School, is the fundamental dichotomy in school processes between the transcendental and the local orders. See the beauty. Look at this statement. What do you think? How much thinking must have been required on the part of the researcher to write this? Do you think simply observing this you can understand this? The transcendental order is governed by, of course, none other than Krishnamurti's worldview, which is the that provides guidelines on how the school ought to function, as well as guides administrative policy and decision making. But the local order is what? Local order constitutes the actual schooling process and tends to function independently of the transcendental order. See, the claim is that the school operates itself on the basis of the world perspective of Krishnamurti related to education. But actually, when the researcher observed, the observance was completely different one. So the transcendental order, as just now I have made a point, it constitutes one strand and is concerned essentially with values and the production of new kind of human being through the process of self-knowledge and transformation. And that's why just now we have discussed that why he didn't like the ideology, why he says that all ideologies are idiotics. I mean, he has his own point of view, his own logical stand. So, according to the philosophy or the principles of or the world perspective of Krishnamurti, essentially, what's that? So the transcendental order is that which constitutes one strand and is concerned essentially with values and the production of new kind of human being through the process of self-knowledge and transformation. So she has described this. And now what she does, after describing that, she starts writing about the history and goals. And is there any compatibility between the two? When school, it was decided that on the basis of, to achieve such goals, we are going to establish this school and we will achieve this goal. So the internal structure and the character of RVS is created by the, as I said, time and again, actors in it. And that's why, I'm of the opinion that the institutional culture is created by the actors of that institution. So when people say, oh, in India, the institutional culture of IITs are different, look at who are there. And who are there in the liberal arts domain. And obviously, the culture has to be different one. Okay, so the author, the researcher, writes that she attached paramount significance to their individual intentions and collective goals. And it is the interaction between actors and the resultant configuration that give rise to what may be termed as an organization. So organization is not that which is perceived by the actor, the people outside the institution, okay, or even by the actors who perceive it individually, okay. So it is in this sense that organization may be viewed processually as or procedurally, you may say, as definitions of social reality. This is what she writes. And she says that the ideological frame of education is an additional and critical factor. And then she goes on, and she writes that, okay, how, even she has quoted Theosophical Society funded for the promotion of national education, Dr. Annie Besant, you all know. I'm not going into that detail. So now I would like to quote when I started the person, Malinowski, who is given credit, particularly in the British culture of ethnographic study. And she has written, the historical background of Rishi Valley schools identifies the specific goal orientation of the school. The formal aspect of goal orientation is the character of the organization defined as the system of values for the pursuit of which human beings organize. And who has said this? None other than Malinowski himself. And that's why it's very important. Any qualitative research methodology you accept to use in your research, you must understand its genesis in terms of its historicity or historical context. And then, quoting Malinowski, she writes that in the case of Rishi Valley School, this character may be seen to exist in the form of Krishnamurti's writings on education in general and on the purpose and contents of schooling in particular. And that's why she was in a position to say that when Krishnamurti writes that to promote educational, cultural, humanitarian activities in the light of Krishnamurti's teaching, and she found the contradictions, she found the paradox, okay. And this is what in the second chapter she writes. Now look at the school organization from the functionaries point of view, the key functionaries. And here she focuses on the academic instrumental dimension of a school life. Generally, if you suppose I as a layman enter into any site of the school, I don't see that. I'll not be able to see that. And that's why in the beginning I made a point, prolonged period of engagement. If you haven't done that, it's very difficult to capture the essence of that. Like the present Director General of Archaeological Society of India, I had the opportunity to attend his few lectures on qualitative method of research. I mean, he's a very fond of discussing this work, particularly from the educational point of view. Anyway, so here again, she writes that how principal was appointed, and when principal was appointed, was there any evidence of transcendental order or the local order? Was there any conflict and the contrast, etc., etc.? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Anyway, time is up. Then when she writes about, but anyway, let me summarize in short. So when she writes about the school culture, particularly in the form of rituals and ceremony, and in this chapter, when you will read, you will find that the author says that she was interested not to understand how rituals and ceremonies are organized, but what is the constitutive of the school life? Okay, it means the discursive practices. And then she talks about that the individual performance to legitimize and maintain other ultimate values through rituals you do. For example, I don't know, maybe day before yesterday I might have discussed that the practice of offering water to our ancestors. Sudhir Kakkar, you must be familiar with that psychologist. Earlier, he was only he used to work in the Freudian context because psychoanalyst he claims himself. But lately, he developed, the sociocultural context. He has written one beautiful article on the psychological processes of the period of the Shraddh from socio-psychological. If you get the chance, please read that. So here, what she does is that she first writes about routinized rituals and the ceremony, and then she compares that how the ceremonies and the rituals which are organized, do they really advocate the ideals of the Krishnamurti, or they are strictly structured only and people do for the sake of doing it? Okay, like when they talk about the various what you call the interfaith dialogue and etc. and etc. So when she writes about the movement in the senior school, and she has written specifically that the upward movement in the senior school is dependent on the pupil's academic ability, which is assessed through regular tests in various subjects and classroom and preparatory work. So that upward movement doesn't get any, doesn't uh, get any space of transcendental order. Nothing. This is what she has written. And then she talks about the three major rituals, like the rituals which are practiced there. And she wanted to see whether there is any correlation among them, which actually talk about the school culture in the perspective of Krishnamurti's ideologies. And she has very beautifully written that the rituals in the category of the transcendental order are non-academic and participatory in nature, bringing participants together in love and joy in the creation and celebration of communities, in the sense of an experience that goes to the root of each person's being and finds in that root something profoundly communal and shared. If you have studied, if you have studied some literature related to this, then one of the anthropologists known as Turner, 1969, when he did this study on rituals in the category of transcendental order. Now see how one sociology, taking a clue from previous sociologists, right, particularly from those sociologists who conducted their studies using ethnographic research methodology, taking a clue, build up the ideas, and come out with different kind of conceptualization. The purpose to discuss all this is that only. And then she quotes, and then she says that such rituals are therefore related to the inner life of the individual in as much as an internal she says, I would like to quote, effervescence is sought in order to create a transcendental being who, through immediate perception and action, will bring about social transformation. So in that sense, these rituals are essentialist in nature, concerned as they are with the essence of life. Now see, hardly people, when you look at the, like our students also go to for their school teaching practice or internship, and ask them, okay, have you observed this? Yes, sir. What do you observe? So, from the layman perspective, they'll say, oh, students are assembling here, certain prayers are going on, no, certain rituals are going on, but why and how? And what is the purpose behind it? So sometimes when people, criticize, oh, why you are wasting time? You're not wasting time because you don't understand the essence behind that. And that's why you're saying, but only the researcher can understand. Similarly, when she talks about the teacher culture, and she finds there are two kinds of teachers, professional teachers and ideologue teachers. And what kind of tussle is there between the two? Okay. And here she talks about the intersubjectivity, and she says that intersubjectivity is just central to the process of perceiving and enacting one's role in so far as my life world is not my private world, but rather is intersubjective. And the fundamental structure of its reality is that it is shared by us. There is an author, I really like him, Susan Luckman. I mean, they studied in the year and published it in 1977. Even Turner's study, who did on process of role taking, and where when talking about the role taking, says roles are identified and given content on shifting axis as the interaction proceeds. So she wanted to see whether that really happens or not in this locale or in this context or at this site. So the teacher's location in a particular social setting is thus an important factor by which his or her specific role may be identified. So what is the specific ideology, and does that is practiced by the teachers or not? But when she, compare and contrasted with the demand of the local order and the recruitment of the teacher in school, she finds that, oh my God, nothing is there. And that's why she has presented the modes of recruitment and the typology of the teacher. And there she has done some comparative study statistically also. Okay. Anyway, so I'll stop here, friends. My only suggestion will be, please read this work, particularly by those who have, urged to, okay, I'm going to use ethnographic research method for my coming research project, or any student whosoever comes to you, or anything. First you read education. Similarly, sociologically, I told you that so many sociologists and anthropologists, they have worked there. So being a researcher, you cannot say that, oh, I'm an educational researcher, so I'm going to write from the educational perspective in educational jargon. You'll have to take a clue, because you are using a method, right, which was originally used in anthropology, and which was majority of the sociologists use that, and then anthropology came into existence. Anthropology is the offshoot of the sociology. Anyway, so you must have access to all the three kinds of sources. Similarly, when she talks about the teacher interaction, the formal interaction, informal interaction, and so beautifully she has written this chapter. It's amazing. But yes, sometimes you'll find it's difficult to what she said, correlate with your own understanding if you are not familiar with the sociological jargons, anthropological terminologies, and how to correlate the two with the actual site, right, that you are going to do. So friends, what I'm going to do, I have nothing to say much. related to this work, because 2 hours not sufficient for this work to discuss, I'll just say thanks to all. Thank you so much. I stop my presentation here and over to the organizer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for an enlightening lecture again. And it was really a pleasure to listen to you and to understand the life at school, which is a very famous ethnographic study. And thank you so much. Looking forward for another brainstorming session tomorrow. And goodbye from our side as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I take leave.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Good night.
Good night.